What's up, gamers? This is the absolute total official tier list ranking for every technology in Victoria 2. I know it's a question that everyone in the world has asked at some point. Well, don't worry, because I'm about to answer it. So, the way I'm going to do this whole thing is, first click a rando nation that doesn't have any of them unlocked so we can look at some stuff. Going to go through these in the categories. There's 5 categories in the game. Army, Navy, Commerce, and Culture and Industry, and 6 groups within them. Oh, and just something, a little edit in here because I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm basing this on using HPM, the newest version, 0.4.6, because that's kind of like the default for a lot of mods. I'd say that most people at this point do play with both the DLCs and with a mod, if not HPM, probably a mod that uses some basis from HPM, and that's what I play all the time, so there might be slight differences from vanilla or the specific mod that you're using, but that's what I'm basing these numbers on. That's what I've got open here right now. And we'll go through just starting with Army, I guess. So in the Army tech tier, the first ones that I'd call like the highest ranked in the Army tech tier, I reckon, personally, is probably light armament. I mean, I'll go through all of them. So Army Doctrine gives you better forts and increases defense for your armies. Light armament decreases combat width and increases attack. Decreased combat width is good for high tech armies because that means when you're against lower tech armies, they can't use as many units, they can't overwhelm you, because numbers would be the only advantage they could have. Heavy armament upgrades artillery. Military science upgrades army organisation and also gives some small boost to mobilisation size. And army leadership gives morale and tactics, which is organisation, morale and tactics are all just like boosts to your armies generally. And pretty much everything in here, with some exceptions, increases army supply consumption, so armies use more resources and therefore cost more. So there is a downside of sorts, but I'm going to say that most of the time that's not too big of a deal, and generally if you're planning to fight, it's worth it, and even if you're not planning to fight, well then you just don't have a large army, do you? So, like I say, light armament I think is the best, and of these, I would say the highest ranked are breech-loaded rifles and machine guns. That's because both of these are involved in this little thing here, colonial negotiations, this little what colonial negotiations does. So if you look here, it's got minimum life rating -5, which basically means you can colonize more stuff. And colonization in this game is something that you can only really do, like, if I get the colonial map mode up, you kind of do it once, okay, I can't see because I'm not a great power. If we just tag switch to someone who is ENG, there we go. So if we look at that same province, now you see there's this blue, they're the places we could colonise, but the life rating is 5 and you need at least 35, so if we choose another one that's a bit closer, I know this one's a bit higher, so 15, is there places in Canada? So this place in Canada, we can colonise because the life rating is 35, and with no technologies, you can only colonise 35 or higher. So each one of these decreases it by normally 5, one of them decreases it by 10, but it basically puts things into time slots. And when that happens, you have to rush because the moment it's colonised, you can't do the colonisation again. The only way to take the land is by war. And so that is one of the big ways of getting lots of land and lots of population, lots of resources, to really buff up your economy. Oh, by the way, this is why I had to... yeah, because now it's not showing how you unlock these inventions. So if I go back to Sokoto, I think it's SOK. Oh, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Yeah, see there, it's now added the base chance 4% and how you unlock it, which is what we needed to look at for this colonial negotiations. One of the things that you can use to unlock it is machine guns. There are other ways, but machine guns, since you're already getting breech-loaded rifles, it's probably the next one you'll get, and so I'm going to put breech-loaded rifles and machine guns, because of those reasons, in A tier. They're not AS because they're not, like, absolutely all the time, or A star. What was it again? Oh, there's so many here. It's going to be quicker when we get to the end because I'll be able to find them quickly. See, when I made this, I did them in the correct order, but it hasn't put them in the correct order. Right, found machine guns finally. It was literally the last one on the list. And I guess, there's breech loaded also right at the bottom. So those two can go in a ranking. Now, the rest of light armament. Obviously you need them for machine guns and bolt actions, but they are still good. Getting that attack, combat width down, unlocking new units. Engineers are the first unit that you can get that gives you siege, which undoes the effects of forts. And the AI loves making forts, so engineers are really good to put in your armies. And, generally speaking, I would say that light armament is pretty good anyway. But yeah, none of the army stuff. A bit of a spoiler here. None of the army stuff can go in A star or A star because you don't really you can get away playing a lot of the game without war. And even if you do have war, it's only when you're against people who are of a similar kind of level to you or higher that you need the army techs. If you're too far below, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. And if you're too far above, fighting a lot of the African nations as the Europeans, it's not going to make any difference because, well, their technology is just so bad. So, because of that, none of the army techs can really get A star. Well, there are individual instances where you might want to be doing that, like if you're, say, planning on going against a war against someone powerful, but a lot of the time you won't, and a lot of the nations you play as you won't. Yeah, they're all good. They're all good. They're all worth getting. If you're going to war, it's good to have them, even if, regardless, but you can play it without them or having to worry too much about them. There are certain times you'll need to rush them, but most of the time, as long as you're good enough for the next war, that's all that really matters when it comes to armies. And talking of which, next, I think, we'll talk about the next thing that I'd say is really good, which is, under military directionism, this specific technology, are two inventions. One gives gas attack, one gives gas defense. And gas attack is pretty useful against in that kind of level thing when you're high-tech against other people who are high-tech, because otherwise they'll have gas attack and you won't, and you'll kind of be screwed. But perhaps the more important one for everyone is gas defense. I mean, gas attack is also good because it can be used against rebels. Rebels never have gas defense. Gas defense just stops the bonus from gas attack on your units, and so it's good for everyone to have that. Gas attack, again, it's I'm going to put it as A because it is very good. Where's gas? Gonna step on that gas. Oh, it's not called gas attack, is it? I'm an idiot. It's military directionism. If I was military directionism, where would I hide? Ah, there we go. So I'm going to put that as A tier because it is really good, especially that gas defense. The amount of difference it makes in battles is very, very good. A tier though, yeah, I'm going to put it as A tier. It is very good if you can get to it. I might lower it to B tier because it is still kind of that one-dimensional thing. If you're not really going to war that much, or you're going to war against people who are very different tech levels, it might not be as important. Although I'd say slightly more because it's definitely very good if you're in the lower tier, because then it just prevents the higher tier from getting that stupid bonus against you. The rest of military science is not really as good, in all honesty. The bonuses to organisation are fine enough, but if you compare that to other techs, like if we just look at, say, army leadership, these give you the same sort of thing where you have these bonuses that apply all across the army, but a lot of their inventions don't add supply consumption, and they also, aside from giving you extra morale, also give you speed, which is kind of a unique thing. I don't think any other techs do that, give speed to your armies. And it gives it to the whole army, if you see that. Aside from giving it to some of the cavalry, it also gives it to armies as a whole. And that means that not only can your smaller armies escape from larger enemy armies easier, but your larger armies can hunt down those smaller armies that would try to run away because they know they can't win. And so that, I would say, makes leadership better than most of the science stuff. Where do we put them on the list, though? Then we've also got Army Doctrine. So Army Doctrine, these defense bonuses are really good, and I'd say that these bonuses are for the most part like light armament. They are a similar tier, I would say. Although generally you'd be going more down light armament just because you're going down machine guns and breech loaders anyway. So I'd say these are still pretty good, although I'd say light armament's slightly better. So what I'm thinking Army Doctrine, most of them C tier except Infiltration. That one's B tier because it gives you access to tanks. And tanks, while you don't need to rush for tanks, I would say, they're not always the best. They are the only other way aside from engineers to give you access to siege. So that's infiltration. I saw that a second ago. Infiltration. So I'm going to say infiltration B tier, and all the things before it are still pretty good. So post-Napoleonic thought, strategic mobility, point defense. Post-Napoleonic, that was somewhere over the right, but it's probably moved because all the stuff I've moved now. Oh, that's good. Post-Napoleonic thought, strategic mobility, and so those are all C tier for now. I might move them up because the negatives you get to supply usage aren't that large, so depending on how we go with the next few, I might move them up to B, but for now I'm keeping them at C, just to show that they are less than infiltration. Infiltration is pretty good, is I would say notably better because it gives you access to tanks. Army leadership, like I say, is also pretty good. I think army leadership, I don't know if it's necessarily as good, because army doctrine also gives you those fort levels alongside improving your army, so it's kind of two different ways that it can improve, because fort level makes it harder for them to siege your stuff, so it's harder to lose stuff in wars, lose provinces, whereas army leadership is armies only. So I think I'm going to put those at D, and I want to make this clear that D tier and E tier are not failures. They aren't, you shouldn't research this. In my mind, E tier is basically, you should research this after anything else. If there's nothing else that you need to research, then that's what the E tier stuff is for. It's kind of like, if there's very specific instances, like there's a very specific decision that needs a certain tech, then obviously that's more important. But we're not looking at decisions for this at all. We are looking at inventions because they're right there on the tech screen, and they are technologies, they are unlocked by this. But, you know, decisions and things, they can wildly change what becomes more important just to get a specific decision. Right, so I put those into D tier, but actually I'm actually going to put these into C tier for now. Might move them once we start adding other techs coming along, but like they are still pretty decent, and I do like getting that speed and stuff, and there is a notable difference in my mind between these ones, army leadership, and the military science ones before directionism, because obviously you need the ones before directionism to get to directionism, but you don't need them until directionism unlocks in 1900, so that's most of the game. So you can go most of the game not really having these, and then just get them at the end when you can get them quickly. Right, I couldn't see staff system, so what I'm going to do is either we'll find it as we're going on, or I missed it out, in which case just remember that military staff system is in D tier, and then I'll update this tier list once I've actually finished on this to add it in, if it turns out to not be there. For now, there is one thing I want to say, which is that the last one, which I believe is aeronautics, this one I'm actually going to put up to B tier, because it allows, in fact, it's actually making me think I'm going to turn the infiltration down. See, the thing with aeronautics is not only does it... Oh, no, sorry, no, it's not that, it's something else I was confusing with. No. So, aeronautics is going to B tier because it unlocks airplanes, and it also gives you all those bonuses to airplanes, which are just really nice. Airplanes, basically, they replace cavalry. Like how tanks replace your infantry, airplanes are a really good replacement for cavalry, and they can actually do really well. So I'm going to put aeronautics at B tier, and the fact all these upgrades that you get don't add to supply consumption at all is really nice for anything. So where is... there it is, found that one quickly. Getting the hang of it. I'm going to put that in the same level as infiltration for now. I think they're both really good. And if you're playing one of the large powers, there's often a big lag in technologies, where up to 1900, like there's loads that unlock at 1900, and before that period, you have a big gap where you can just catch up on everything, and so that can really help for getting up to aeronautics and military directionism as well. Also, aeronautics is 1914, where most of these others are 1919, and so at that point, it's not at like a big level. A lot of them is every 10 years or so, or every 10th interval. So you see there, so you got all the stuff unlocked at the beginning, but you got 50 and 70 and 100 and 1919. This one's outside of it, so it might give you a bit of breathing room for it as well, so that's quite nice. And then that leaves us with heavy armament. And I don't know what things are like in multiplayer, but I can say in single player, you don't really need artillery. If you just have infantry and then just have enough cavalry and enough engineers for your reconnaissance and your siege, that's fine. And something you might think is, okay, artillery, fine. But this one, look at all those bonuses for armor there. Look, loads of bonuses for armor. That's great, isn't it? Well, it seems like it's like the bonuses for airplanes, except the airplane bonuses don't add to supplies for anything, right? Once you unlock them, all these little inventions. But when you do it with heavy armament, that's plus 50% supply consumption for all of 3 of the armor upgrades. And so it's like, that's pretty huge. Like, I don't think there's anything else that is plus 50%. That's 20. Even these other artillery ones are plus 30 for artillery. All these ones are like plus 20, plus 20, plus 20. That's like plus 20 with little bits. Like, that is huge upgrades to supply consumption for, it's fine, it's good, but it's nothing like the aeronautics one. So heavy armament, or before heavy armament itself, I'm honestly going to give that an E. It's not that they're bad, it's not like it's a detriment or anything. It's just that you really, I would say, don't need to worry too much about it. Like, it really is like a, okay, I've got nothing else left to research, I might as well do it kind of thing. Because like I say, you don't really need artillery that much, and even if you want to use it, you don't really need to upgrade it, I would say, that much as doing single player. It's far more important to have your infantry upgraded and have them be good than, was indirect artillery fire? It sounds like it would be one, wouldn't it? Yeah. There we go. And then, just because, the upgrades to tanks are nice, I'm going to put in D tier, what was it called again? Heavy armament, that's it. Heavy armament. I'm going to leave that in D for now. It is better than these ones, but it's not something I really prioritise ever. We've done army, hooray! Navy. Now, navy, on the whole, in Victoria 2, is nowhere near as important as the army. You can't use navies to take land or anything, you can only use them to blockade ports and things. And there's only really one other use for navies, aside from blockading ports and fighting other armies and transporting troops, which can be, again, it can be useful circumstantially. Some things it will be very useful to have some of that, but most of the time you're not going to be fighting many naval battles until the very end, and by that point, either you're going to be a big dominant power or you're not. So the other thing is colonial points, or colonial stuff. So if we look through the different sorts, naval doctrine, this is your naval base thing. It gives naval base max level, and it says colonial power points, but if we look at that, you need to have sea power and the merchant marine to get any of them, and so that's really just Britain for most of the main nations. So I'm not going to look at that as being a big thing for it, because most of the time it doesn't matter, but the naval base max level really does. Construction and propulsion, it says max speed, that's a lie. The actual main thing here is that it unlocks new ship types. That's the big thing with those. Naval engineering, naval build time, colonial prestige and some stuff. Alphabet flag signaling, supply range and some stuff. Naval leadership, organ prestige and some stuff. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, engineering, science and leadership. These three, kind of not important at all. In the group that's already fairly unimportant, these three are just like, you really don't need it. The main thing that you have your ships for is, if you're going to have battles, just try and have overwhelming numbers. And otherwise, you're going to be doing transporting, which you don't, it's the early techs for those. It's pretty easy stuff to get. And the other thing is colonial power points. There's 2 ways to get colonial power points: making ships and increasing naval base sizes and making naval bases. I believe in only core provinces. I always mistake whether that's the case or not. And as the game goes on, the balance of these two changes. In the late game, making the really big late game ships gives you loads of colonial power points, but in the early game ships give you hardly any, and so naval bases are the way you do that. Additionally, naval bases increase your naval supply range by upgrading them, the same as these technologies here, and so just by upgrading your naval base levels you already get that increased range. And if you're not doing like some kind of pacifist run or something, who would ever do one of those, this for most nations is a good enough way to get the places you need to get the colonial range. And so for that, naval doctrine I'm going to say is very good. I'm not going to put it as A tier because it's unlike the army stuff, which is useful for anyone who isn't doing a meme run, With the naval stuff, it's much less useful, and we're really focusing on the secondary impact. So I am going to say that the different ports. Now, as I said, naval ports are most important in the earlier ones. However, by the late ones, you need big ports to make the big ships. You can't do it with the lower level ports, and so you need the higher level techs, and making them higher level also increases the rate at which you get your stuff. So I'm going to put all of these in B tier, because even though the ports themselves become less important for the colonial points, they become more important for making the ships that give you colonial points, and so that's basically the same thing. You can't have one without the other. What were the names of the other ones? I'm so bad at remembering. Battleship Column, Raider Group Doctrine, and there's Model Naval Doctrine. So yeah, those are all B tier in my mind. They can't be A tier just because of the less usefulness compared to the army stuff, but still good. Still good. Now, ship design. These are also very good. However, I would say that they become... Actually, sustaining and maintaining ships is much harder than ports, because you have to continue paying upkeep, and because they constantly take damage unless you're constantly repairing them. So you have that, and naval battles aren't really that important overall, to be honest. While it is nice to get the troop ships, again, it is very circumstantial, and I don't think... No, I'll put the Clippers and the steamers. I will put those above. I'll put those in B tier, because it is always good to have those. But everything else, so Clipper design and paddle steamers, those guys are going into B tier. Okay, so in the case of steamers, I actually use all these names I just took from the actual files and then removed the underscores, which is why some of them look weird, and so steamers is just paddle steamers in the game. But that is paddle steamers. It's just only written as steamers, which is also why I struggled to find it. And then screw-propelled, steel, steam turbine, and oil-driven. All of those. I'm going to put those C tier. They're fine. They're useful. I know there are decisions, very big decisions, that use these, but we're not looking at decisions today. Okay, decisions are always circumstantial. So yeah, they're all in C tier. And as for engineering, science, and leadership, look, they're all going in E tier. They are just like the artillery stuff. It's nice to have them, but they honestly are just not really necessary at all. If you've got nothing else to research, why not go for it? But, yeah. I'm not going to lose any sleep over these guys being an E tier. Oh, I just found military staff system. Which one was that? Military staff system. Okay, this is another case of them renaming from the game files, so I'm not actually sure which one it was. I've forgotten, but you remember what I said, right? You remember which one I said was missing. Okay, I haven't been keeping count of how many of these I just got rid of and put into E tier, so I'm probably missing a couple, but again, they'll show up at the end and that'll be fine and dandy. And we'll know that all the naval stuff left needs to go into E tier, right? We'll remember that. So, commerce. So, the way these boys work is, the three on the right, these increase the size of your nation's economy, and so by getting the same proportion, you'll get more money. And the left two increase the amount you skim off the top in the way of taxes adding or admin efficiency reduction of costs. And also tax efficiency as well. So I'm going to just explain the first two. Tax efficiency there, admin efficiency and a bit of tax efficiency there, factory input efficiency in the middle one, and output efficiency on the right one, which is just input means it uses less resources for the same output, and output means it gets more for the same input. And these two also increase precious goods production a bit and market size. And this one here gives you prestige, whereas this one here gives you more factory output efficiency on top as the inventions. And then market functionality. This gives you diplomatic influence, which is how great powers influence other nations, get them into their sphere of influence. Outputs for farming and a bunch of other stuff, and also a bit of precious metals, and then also a bit of tax efficiency as well. You can probably tell which one here I'm going to say is the best. Freedom of trade is so good. Market structure, business regulations, also really good. After market regulations, it drops off because while they keep the diplo influence, precious goods, tax efficiency, they lose the thing that's good for every nation, which is the farming output and other productions. So from market regulations onwards, Economic responsibility is one of the ones we saw earlier, could be used for colonial negotiations, but it's a tier 5 tech, so you're probably just going to get machine guns anyway, because it's right after the one you just got, if you're doing that, so I'm not even going to worry about it too much for that. So what I'm going to say is freedom of trade is so good, and it's a really early tech, very low cost. It's really worth getting, and the other thing about freedom of trade is it also unlocks a couple of factories, and cement factories is really good in the early game because everyone needs cement to build their factories, and so it's a good way to make money. Also making the cement in-house so that you can guarantee it for making your factories, because again, when everyone's trying to make lots of factories, it's very easy to not be able to access the resources you need to make that, and so freedom of trade is just really good for that. So freedom of trade is going to be our first ever A-star tier, if I can find it. There we go. This is our first A-star tier. This is one that I would say, if it's there, you just go for it, because it is so good for every single nation. Great powers get bonuses for their stuff, everyone else gets bonuses to production. It has tax efficiency, so you both get a larger share of the economy and grow the economy at the same time, which is fantastic. It is so good. The next two I'm going to put as A, not because they are worse than it, but just because I wouldn't say it's like, these are like on the border of essentiality, market, freedom of trade, market structure, business regulations, and I'd say because freedom of trade is so early and so low cost, I'd put it as just being above. Market structure and business regulations are still amazing, and market regulations and the ones below it are really good for great powers, and so I'm going to say market structure and business regulations, those two get A, and the other three, they get B, because they are just good. So that was market structure, business regulations. And business regulations also goes to A. And then the other three... No, they go to B tier. That wasn't right. There we go. Easy does it. So they are all really good techs. Now, the other ones that increase the size of the economy... Like, yeah, precious goods is nice, but it's so, like, insanely specific. And the other bonuses they give are like, whatever. Prestige is nice, but it's one each time. And yeah, it's just not really that great. However, I will say getting these factories is good. Is very, very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a... What I'm thinking is the ones that give factories give to C tier. So guild-based production, early classical theory and critique, and late classical theory. Put those as C tier maybe? And then put all the others, I don't know whether to put others as D or A. No, they're not as bad as the E tiers. They're not as bad as the E tiers. I'm going to put these as D tiers, I think. Yeah, I think so. Because they are better. I'd say they're probably better, worth your time most of the time than the Army and Navy techs, because at the end of the day they do improve your economy, which is always nice. And I'm not going to put them on yet because there's so many of them, I just want to be able to bang them out at the end. So we'll go to financial institutions next. Tax efficiency is one of those things that... Actually, you know what? No, I lied. I'm going to do them right now. So early classical theory, late classical theory, and guild-based production. Neoclassical, was that one of them? Yes, it was. Wow. Neoclassical theory sounds like it should be a culture thing, doesn't it? There's Keynesian economics. I know I'm pronouncing that name wrong, because that's a guy's name, and I know it's not Keynesian. It's Keynes, isn't it? It's Keynesian, because it's Mr. Keynes. I think that's all of those ones. And so then it's just the output ones. Yes, I have got the red sun in the sky stuck in my head. Back to the clap. Monetary system and financial institutions. These are both nice, but like I say, they are kind of more skimping off the top, which isn't bad. Definitely not bad, but also like not as good as just increasing your economy. It's always good to get the extra money, but I prefer doing it by... And I don't know if it's actually the most, best way, because I know like when people do multiplayer, they just shove tariffs massively up and don't care about the effects on the economy. So, at least that's one of the metas apparently. And maybe I play in a little bit more of a, not necessarily RP way, but a more way you kind of expect that, like, increasing tax efficiency feels like it should have some downside compared to growing your economy, but maybe I'm wrong. of these, I'd probably say that tax efficiency is probably better than the admin efficiency just about, but like, it doesn't really matter because you get tax efficiency if you go for most of these anyway. So I'm going to say that almost all of these, aside from one that I have purposefully not moused over quickly enough that it shows you the inventions, market determined exchange rates, so all the stuff to do with banks and money printing and the bank system. I'm going to put all of those at C tier. They're good. They're never really a rush, but they are good for everyone. Like I say, they're not really like wow ones or ooh ones. Probably why I didn't remember the names, but I like how one of the technologies that you unlock is no standard, because if you play an unciv, you don't have no standard to start with, which means that there is apparently something below having no standard money. I guess that's just not having money. All scientific management, found the one I was looking for earlier. Also, I think I just put these in the wrong one. Whoops. Whoopsies. There we go. I think that's fixed it. He raises his eyebrow as he says. Right, I think that's all of those. And then we get to the real one. Market determined exchange rates. For some reason, this has one invention. Hyperinflation. You know what hyperinflation is? You're probably thinking one of two things. Depending on what you're thinking, either 1, you'll need Jesus, or 2, yeah, it's just a bad thing. Factory cost down, consciousness, because we'd had things that had downsides, but they had upsides as well, and the upsides were generally better than the downside. This invention is just a downside. Now you get the admin efficiency. Admin efficiency, as I said, I don't think is as good as tax efficiency, and by the very end of the game, it's not really that much gonna make a difference. And factory costs, while that won't make much of a difference, it's just a really weird one, and so I literally never, ever get this. And that is why. For the only thing so far, will we see another? You'll have to wait and see. But market determined exchange rates is F. My advice is, even if you can do this one, even if it is the only technology you have left to research that you can research, and you don't have to store up points, we'll talk about that in a second, don't even bother with market determined exchange rates. Just don't bother. Maybe it is actually worth it, but I'm not even going to take the risk. I'm not even going to see. Okay, maybe if you want to boost up your consciousness a bit more, as though the game doesn't already make it insanely easy to have it constantly at 10, without doing anything, even when trying to keep it down. So, yeah, no, I just wouldn't even bother. The bonus you get isn't worth even seeing if it is worth it because of the negatives. So, commerce. Way 3 out of 5. Let's see. So, culture. Now this has got some big ones, and this one is the one I'm least sure of in my ideas of where some things are going to go. Some of them, however, are really obvious, but we'll go through all of them again. So, these ones give you prestige gain, and also shared prestige. Now, shared prestige is different to the permanent prestige we saw here, where it gives you 1 no matter what. In these, you get less prestige each time someone else gets it. So, as it's saying there, plus 10 at the moment, but if someone else gets this, it will be less, and then less, and then less. It is more useful the earlier you get it, and less useful later. That's the way shared prestige works. Philosophy is research points. There are some other bonuses. It has shared prestige there. It's not why you care about it. Social thought, this gives educational efficiency and colonial migration. Political thought is a weird one that we'll talk about. It says max national focuses and then a bunch of negatives and weird stuff. We'll get into those when we get into those. And psychology, reinforcement and regiment experience aside from psychoanalysis, which gives you the radio. So let's talk about, I think, probably the most... If you've played Victoria 2 for any length of time, you'll probably know that this one is good. In fact, it is insanely good. 50% research points, that's on your base number. So here you'll see we've got 0.92, which as an unciv, that's very, very low and not really worth. So let's go back to the UK. Because the UK starts out 9.39, so let's round that up to 10. Okay, from this. Their base number is 5.22, that's their base from intellectuals and clerks. However, from improved technology, they are already at 9.39. That's big, right? Like, just from their improved technology they start with, they are already getting like almost another tech per tech, right? And that's just with one. When you start getting these other ones that give you plus 50 to base, plus 100 to base, like, you can get so many more technologies. I did mention earlier about how there are like this limit at 1900 where you're waiting, if you're one of the bigger nations, more powerful nations with better technology, that you'll research pretty much everything, and so you're not waiting around and stuff, and it affected, when you could, how many options you had. That at this point, when you're getting close to 1900, the number of options you have for technology goes down because you'll research so many as these advanced nations because of the technology boosts you'll get specifically from philosophy tech. So, because of that, I am saying that all philosophy techs, all of them, even the late ones, they are all getting A-star tier. You should try and get these as fast as possible. In fact, not only should you get them as fast as possible, but you'll see that it says, we have accumulated 1.8 research points that we are currently unused. You can store, I believe, about a year's worth of technology points when you're not researching anything, and then it will dole them out over the next however many days or however long it takes to dole them out. Because of this, I recommend, if you've got less than a year to get a new technology before one of these philosophy texts is about to unlock, just store up points until it unlocks, and that way you can just bang these out so fast, and then you can just get so many researches. Really, going hard on research is a real meta for this game. It is so powerful. And so because of that, philosophy texts, all of them, they all get that A-star. These ones I'd even say, like, freedom of trade is like the low level of A-star, but these ones are just so insanely good. So there is our A-stars from culture. Crazy, bro. So, now to look at the others. Right, social thought is, social thought and aesthetics are both very good in specific circumstances, but less so in others. Basically, they're like, the worse you're doing, the better they are. So social thought, who cares about colonial migration? Educational efficiency, especially what you get from Darwinism, that plus 30%, all these plus 10s, because education affects literacy rate, and literacy rate directly affects your base research point gain, which is the one affected by philosophy, and so getting that up is really important. But if you start as someone in, let's say Sweden, they start with an 80% literacy rate, I think, so these aren't really as useful for you, but they are still very useful for pretty much everyone else, and they are kind of useful if you start colonizing, because you can start colonizing the people in those lands, educating, sorry. And then, as I say, the aesthetics ones, if you have low prestige, getting these out, or if you're not very good at either industry or military, banging out these is like the meta way to get up in the great powers list, which is useful for all sorts of things. And I did say earlier that decisions, you're not counting those. These are not used really in specific decisions, but they get you to great power status, which can be used to unlock decisions. And so because it's not specific decisions, I'm saying that is, we're talking about general mechanically speaking. It gets you to great power, which gives you other things, and that's good. Or secondary power, which is also good. So I'm going to say that biologism is so good, I'm going to put that as A tier. The others, because of their more, as I said, situational, the worse you are, the better they are kind of thing, I'm going to put those as B tier. Not that they're bad at all, they are really good, but it's because of the more situational nature of them. I think even Germany, for example, Prussia, all of Germany has a really high educational rate, so you can have a game as Prussia and not really worry about education rate at all, and you'll be fine, just as an example. So this boy goes to A. I would say it is close, it's like a high A, but it's not like the youth A stars we got up there. They are crazy. And this is also kind of a meta thing, but it's like a slow burn meta thing. As Brazil, for example, you can do really well if you get that stuff high. B for Brazil, because if you're playing Brazil, that's what you want. I have a feeling I did miss out one, but I don't know which one. So now we get political thought and psychology. So political thought's kind of a weird one. A lot of these bonuses are kind of all over the shop. Mostly it's things like rebel organization gain up or down, or it's things like war exhaustion down, or it's things like plurality up or down, consciousness up or down, militancy up or down. The main thing is national focuses. Getting max national focuses, as long as you've got states, is always useful. It can be, sometimes you can kind of run out of things that you'd think you'd use them for. I'll go on to the UK because they can probably do more stuff right now. National focuses in this game, by the way, not like Hearts of Iron. You click on a state, got this little box here, click that, it shows you a bunch of options. So if it's a colony, which we're not clicked on right now, you've got different things you can do, like encouraging migration, making people less militant or stuff. Increasing other stuff. You've got immigration push and pull. You can try and get people to promote more to specific stuff. You've got production stuff, and you've got party loyalty, which changes how they vote. And what I'd say as a general thing is, if you have a specific goal in mind, do that. If you don't have a goal in mind, check to see what your intellectuals are. If it's below 2%, boost the intellectuals. If that's done, if you've got factories, boost craftsmen. If you've got plenty of craftsmen, or you've got high literacy, boost clerks. And if you're failing all of that, you still, used up everything else, absolutely. If you've got like colonies, you can encourage migration there or something like that, make people less angry in colonies, boost colony maintenance stuff. But honestly, like, if you get to the point where you don't have anything else, if you've got low literacy, boosting craftsmen, if you've got high literacy, boosting clerks, you can pretty much do that to the end of the game, and it won't be a problem. You could do things like boosting landowners if you're less than, I believe it's 1%, I can't remember if it's 1% or 2% for those guys. One of the two. But, there's always something you can do with it, and so that is always useful in my mind. So, while the other guys I put as B, these guys I'm going to put it as C. These are also, these have two other things, including revolution and counter-revolution gives you the Dark Continent, and this is the one that lets you start colonizing most of Africa. So because of that, revolution and counter-revolution is actually going to go up to B tier, because if you want to colonize, you need to get the Dark Continent, absolutely. If you're not colonizing, generally it's not really worth that much. And these are the only ones, by the way, political thought, I am going to say. So many of these are used for so many decisions, they could be useful, just as kind of like a side note. But I'm going to put revolution and counter-revolution as B tier because of that. And all the others, I'm going to put as C, with the caveat that it really is very dependent. Sometimes you might not want to do this stuff, but it's so, the national focuses are actually genuinely very good, very useful for getting your country off the ground. The national focuses are really the best way to get your intellectuals up, and that gives you tech points, and that's really good. And clerks give you tech points as well, I'd forgotten to say. It kind of slipped my mind. So revolution and counter-revolution B, and all the others C. I think sounds good. Okay, well, I might have screwed up on the list itself, but you heard what I said, so if anything seems off, and that'll give away what people in the comments just skipped to the end of the video, won't it? It'll give away what people skip to the end of the video, because they'll be like, why did you put that one there? Well, obviously, because you didn't watch the video at the part where I screwed up the list. Oh dear. Right, revolution and counter-revolution, nationalism, imperialism, state and government. So this is all the, N words. What, sorry, officer? Don't know what you're talking about. Okay, I'm going to assume that's everything. And if it's not, we'll find out. And so now we've got just, I believe, just the psychology stuff left. And we'll go back on to Sakoto. Because the wonderful Wizard of Oz. So most of these, they're nice to have, but I never really prioritize them. Psychoanalysis, however, it's at that it's actually 1890, so it's not quite at that point. But getting radios is nice, although not really something you'd need to rush. It also does have a bunch of negatives as well, so I'm just going to put all of psychology in D tier, not because they're bad, but because it's whatever. They're fine. They're fine enough. They give you some fine bonuses, but, if you wanted to improve your army most of the time, you can just improve it in your army itself. I'm sure that there's some meta that you can use them for, but I've never really bothered with it. So, all of these ones, they do be going into that C tier. No, wait, what did I say? No, D tier, sorry. Right, I'm definitely missing some. Oh, dear. So yeah, all of psychology, D tier, not because they're bad, but because there's other stuff that's better, basically. They're kind of they're nice to have, but they're better than getting the E tiers if you need to make a choice, but they're still there. Right. Finally, industry. Industry. The wonderful world of industry. Power. This boosts farming and gives a few boosts to a few other things, and is pretty nice. Also, textile mill and fabrics from that. Yeah, most of these early ones give you factories and things. These ones are basically factory throughput and lowers factory costs, and also some other productions. Metallurgy and mining is basically like your mines, makes your mines better. Infrastructure, it's all about railroad max level. And chemistry and electricity, it says supply limit. However, it also has a few other things, including ones that improve pop growth. So these ones, a lot of these are far more equal, I would say. But what I'm going to start with is some of the chemistry ones, specifically all the chemistry ones that improve pop growth. I'm mostly focusing medicine, inorganic chemistry, because you can get these early. If you focus on these, pop growth just means you have more pops, larger economy growth. It's something that you, if you get it early on in the game, it's really useful. If you get it right at the end of the game, it's basically useless. So I'm going to put medicine and inorganic chemistry at A. You don't have to rush them, because it's only a little bit each year, but they are just, you know, really nice. Really nice to have. So those can go to A tier, because they are amazing. So power, I'm actually going to say that, like, these are all really good. I'm going to say the ones that give you factories, I'm going to put those as A tier and the others as B. And it's kind of like, I'd say they're kind of close. Mostly it's like, industry stuff is always good because it grows your economy. And it grows it by substantial amounts. It's very much like freedom of trade, although freedom of trade also has a few extra bonuses, the things about also improving tax efficiency and also improving diplo points. So I've already forgotten what the first one was called. In fact, you know what? I think all the steam engines are actually A tier. Now I'm thinking about it. I think the factories are definitely nice additions, but just the amount of stuff they add to your economy is all good. It's all good. Right, mechanized production. Factory throughput is always really nice. I'd say it's less useful than just getting the raw resources, because raw resources is always useful. So what I'm thinking is, I'd say B tier, just because they are slightly, to point out that they are below the power. Not that they're bad. They are very good. And they are pretty much like right up there, but getting more resources, because one of the big problems you can often have is you end up with like resource shortages where you just can't access things. It's bad if you run out of steel, but the world often has a problem where you have so much steel being produced, like, you know, you run out of steel because people are building battleships, okay, then you build loads of steel factories, okay, but then you run out of iron and coal. What do you do then? Nothing. So you have to have the raw resources in order to prevent the shortages affecting you. It's fine to have shortages around the world, as long as it doesn't affect you. And so that's why these are going in B tier, because you just need to make sure you can keep those raw resources up. Of course, if you're a small country, not many raw resources, doesn't help as much. But I think, generally speaking, I would say power is more important than the mechanization. So mechanical production, let's find it. Shouldn't be too difficult, clueless. Next, metallurgy and mining. It's very weird, even though I really go for these ones. The fact is, look here, look, farming plus 15, coal plus 10, sulfur plus 10, iron plus 10. It adds to everything, whereas this one is far more specific. Getting these things is good. I normally leave them until later anyway, when I don't have the other ones, because these other ones, like I say, this one, loads of different stuff. The commerce, freedom of trade, loads of different stuff. In fact, all the ones that are improved by this, improved by these, the mining ones, are also improved by power and market functionality. So even though these ones improve it by more, I would say that generally speaking, like a lot of nations in the world just don't have coal or iron or sulfur. And so it doesn't really help too much with those guys. It's kind of, it's far more specific. So I'm going to put them as C, not because they're like a bad one or like a lesser one, but because they are more situational. Alright, let's see. Should be able to get these ones. There's only a few left. Railways. Now, railways are one of those things that it's always nice to have. Even if you don't want to work on them, your capitalists can work on them, because you're not using planned economy, right? You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't play Victoria 2 on planned economy, would you? You wouldn't do that. You're not that crazy. So, railways, they're one of those things you always have to have. How quickly do you need to focus on them? Honestly, they're probably something you should focus on really early. I generally don't. I don't know whether to put them in B or C. I'm gonna put them in C, but that's not like they're like on the border in my mind. Right, the rest of these, I mean, they do give some good bonuses, but I wouldn't rush them. I'm gonna put these guys as C as well. Again, it's just like they're nice things. And they do, and unlike some of the other ones that are just nice to haves, these ones are like generally nice. Fertilizer factory, that's used in lots of stuff. Organic chemistry, again, unlocks more factories. Factory throughput, big throughputs, oil, like that's good to have, genuinely. It's not just a nice to have. Electric gear factories, like there's loads of factories unlocked in this. Okay, synthetic polymers, I'm going to put those guys down to D tier. In fact, I'm going to put those guys down to E tier. That's like nothing. That's actually ridiculous. So synthetic polymers, I think I just picked those up, didn't I? You guys, you're E tier. Sorry, Chief. You guys go to E. But the other ones, they are so nice. And the military staff system, I can't remember where that one goes. You'll remember, right? You can look through the video. So, this is my Victoria 2. I don't think anyone else has done one of these on YouTube, as far as I'm aware. Victoria 2 Technologies tier list. And looking at the amount of time it's taken me to record this, which is probably longer than the video that you see, yeah, I know why. So why not tell me why I'm wrong in the comments below, and why not tell those people who tell me why I'm wrong, why they're wrong in the comments below, because surely he wouldn't say that just to boost engagement or anything. Surely he wouldn't do that. And until the next one. Oh yeah, by the way, the reason why there isn't another part to the Victoria 2 Pacifist playthrough is because I streamed it, and then I forgot to either save a VOD locally or download it before it expired, and then it expired, so whoops. I got to 1905, it's not there anymore. But anyway, ta-ra.